Okay, hello everyone. Sorry, I changed my audio settings and forgot. So, can everybody
Hi.
hear us now? So, I'm
Well,
Jeremy
I can hear
Hochhalter.
you.
I'm here with Sarah Stewart, who has written for the Scarred Lands. She wrote a. Actually, I'll let her tell you about that stuff here in a moment. But essentially,
Yep.
this is the lore you know, and we're going to talk about third party settings, starting with Scarred Lands, written by, well, originally published by Swords and Sorcery, or sorry, Swords.
Sword and sorcery.
Yeah, Sword and
White Wolf.
Sorcery.
Yep.
And then currently being published by Onyx Path Publications. Yay, Onyx
Yeah.
Path, thank you. And I actually just found some interesting info on why that happened thanks to Sarah because she's awesome. So, hi Sarah,
Hi.
how's it
It's
going?
good to see you. Yeah. Just my name is Sarah Stewart. It is going well considering that we are all stuck at home.
It's true.
Thankfully, I was already working from home, so strangely, it's not that much different.
Yeah.
Um, but I know it is very different from my friends who did not already try to do this business from home. So yeah, it's been great. We I am down in the very deep weeds of Scarred Lands these days, when my day job doesn't call me away. Um, which my day job's pretty quiet right
I
now
was
this
saying right
week.
now there's nowhere for it to call you to, so
Yeah, my day job's very quiet right now. But so it's given me more time to work on this content. But yeah, my wife and I partnered together to write a Scarred Lands novel, Vigilant, book one of Through Shadows and Dreams, available in fine ebook stores everywhere, which is to say Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Drive Through Fiction, and I recommend getting it on Drive Through Fiction because you can get a print on demand copy there as well.
yay.
Um, and we consider ourselves kind of lore masters of the Scarred Lands, as I have personally read all 35 plus books that came out between 2000 and 2004. Um, Not necessarily every word of every book, but I have certainly skimmed every book, and read all of the content pieces.
Yeah.
I mostly just skip things like stats because unless I needed a monster, I didn't need to know that. But um, I'm familiar, and I've probably forgotten more than other people know because I've been getting into this stuff now for almost 20 years. But staggering. But yeah, and some of the things we have done is actually try to make sense out of the frequently contradicting information
Well,
because
I,
it yeah, it was 35 books plus over 35 books written by a handful of guys in their 20s, in 4 years.
yeah.
There's a lot
Yeah.
because these aren't tiny.
Well, we'll talk about that. So, essentially,
Yeah,
third edition started in 2000 or in 1999, right around there.
late 99, late
And
99.
then within a month of the first book coming out, right? Or something like that.
It was the player handbook had come out, I don't remember if the DMG had come out yet or not, but the monster manual had not.
Right.
And that book beat it by a few months.
And I can
And
remember it coming out because I
yeah,
was already playing third edition. I was like waiting for the monster manual. Just a little history.
yep,
My first D&D book was a monster manual. I should have brought it over here. It's like first or the second edition AD&D with all of the cartoon monsters on the cover. The really, I don't want to say bad art, but obviously it's not like the stuff on your screen right now. They didn't do art like that back in the day. And
no,
so monsters were just like my jam. They've always been my jam. And so
yeah,
when this book came out, I was like, what is this? And I got it. And it's this awesome monster manual, but it's like stuffed with lore from this
stuffed with lore.
from this world that no one had ever heard of before, you know.
Yeah,
And then over the course of those 4 years, they
about 4 years.
just dumped.
They just jumped.
Right?
And I'd go into our friendly neighborhood game store and there'd just be like you'd search the racks and there'd just be like these books. And I started just picking them up by the bucketful. We didn't have a lot of money back then, so it was slow and going initially. But then when the line was canceled, I just went and sweeped up everything I could. I think I was missing like once everything kind of fell off the racks, I was missing one book that I had to go purchase online. The last book I picked up was one of the Termana books, the little Termana book, but I
Oh,
had
the
everything else
Gazetteer.
by then. Yeah, the Gazetteer, not the big campaign book,
Yeah.
the Gazetteer. But And by that point, I picked up everything else, and several things I got discounted too. I remember it's like their line is dead. It's $3, and I'm like, great, yeah, suck that all up. But yeah, and I dove into it. I ran a campaign, and it isn't technically finished yet. Although it's been on hiatus for a while. I ran a campaign that started because of that creature collection. There's this. If you flip through it, there's this wonderful creature called the Mithril Golem. And it blew my mind when I
Yeah.
read about it, because it describes this city at this cliffside, and you look out at the city out there at the ocean, and the ocean is made of blood, and it's like, what is this? There's this colossal mithril thing guarding the city from potentially from things coming out of the bloody ocean, and it's like, what is this? This is so cool.
Right.
And I just was like, I want to run this, and everybody's like, no, we're gonna run Greyhawk, and I'm like, I'm gonna run this.
Nice. Well, so let's talk a little bit about that. So, Scarred Lands itself is, I don't want to say it's a unique setting because it actually has a very,
It is not
well,
unique, but it is.
right, it has a very well used beginning premise, which is
Yeah.
there were titans that created gods. Stop me if you've heard this one before. There were titans that created gods, and then the gods revolted against the titans and overthrew them, and all of this stuff. And that in itself, if that's where they had left it, it would
Yeah.
have been the Forgotten Realms. It might as well have just been, whatever. But then they
Yeah.
were like, and 150 years later, you're dealing with it as the characters. These
Yeah.
people are who very potentially lived through the horror that was the Divine War, are now trying to scrape their lives back together. And it's not like the gods keep their noses out of things either,
No.
So
No.
it's not it is a little, Greek. There is that fiddling with things that Greek gods were
Yeah.
known for. But I feel like the
And
Scarn gods, or
yeah.
the Scarlands gods, are just so much worse about it.
Oh God. Well, most of them. Most of them. I give kudos to one god of Scarn, Madriel, who I think is not as bad as all of the others. But and there's some demigods who aren't so bad, but yeah, even the good gods get up to shit
Yeah.
pretty easily, because yeah, some of the stuff just Corian, the lawful good god, has done, or just like, dude, there were people living there.
Right? People, though. I mean, people.
But yeah. But what I think what makes Scarred Lands different isn't just like, oh yes, Greek mythology, Titans, gods. Oh, it's post-apocalyptic. It merges all of that. It epic scales incredibly well.
Yeah.
Because the cool thing is, because this massive war happened within living memory of various races, but all the heroes died during said war, pretty much. Like, not quite all of them. There's a few kicking around, but
Yeah.
there's just a handful kicking around. And most of them died during the war. And so you have this opportunity to be heroic, and because of this just colossal scale that you can go to, you can really go up to that level. And I always considered Scarlands higher magic than your standard Greyhawk, Sword Coast settings. At least I ran it that way. I don't know if everybody else runs it high magic, but I always was like, yes, everyone gets these things and have some stuff. And because there's such a big source, and they introduced so many cool spells and magic items and concepts that weren't in other settings.
Yeah.
That are at least at the time, and at the time it was like, I don't even remember what all came. I do remember we had like the Sunken Citadel was in parallel at that same time, and a lot of those Greyhawk campaigns, and I just thought Scarlands was cooler. It was cooler because it's like, no, we're gonna go into the blood steppes and fight giant
Right.
monsters with crazy mutations. So I ran. I started running back then and ran through all the old modules they had back then. I ran through the Serpent Amphora, and thus the book happened.
Yeah. So did that just recently come back out?
Serpent Amphora, we just put out a 5e version of the original 3x free module. There were 4 books for the Serpent Amphora cycle. The Serpent Amphora, which was this little free thing, it's free PDF. and then 3 books: Serpent in the Fold, Serpent and the Scepter, and the Serpent and the Citadel. So Travis just put out Travis Legg, Garland's Line Lead, just put out a re-release of that little mini thing, Serpent Amphora, and I provided some pre-generated players for that, pre-generated characters for that, based on the characters from our novel Vigilant.
That's awesome.
Vigilant is a prequel to that mini module, but it also ties into the plot of the Serpent in the Fold. So we used stuff from the Serpent Amphora and the Serpent in the Fold into our book, which tells the backstory of the guy who walks in at the beginning of the module and says, "Take this Amphora and bring it to Lave," and drops dead. He doesn't drop dead in the books. And also tells the story of one of the NPCs from the Serpent in the Fold, Amra Vareth, and her backstory, although from Eochaid's point of view. And plus we told about how they got the Amphora and just the tragedy of around that. And then in future books, should we finish writing them and publish them, are the rest of the story and how that folds into some of the greater Scarlands lore and some of the mystery around all sorts of concepts in the Scarlands that I won't get into.
Do you have like I want to publish it by this time ETA? Not necessarily like a realistic thing, but like I'm aiming for this, like 2050 or
it's complicated, honestly. There's just been I don't want to say anything untoward.
Yeah, that's totally that's life.
Yeah,
life gets in the way.
Yeah, and how we're going, and I want to finish the series, and I certainly want to finish book 2. Book 2 is really dark, and it's been difficult to write. I gotta say that it's EK goes down a very, very dark path in book 2, and because at the end of book 1, I don't want to say too many spoilers, but
no spoilers.
The book, the end. The most of the book is a prologue. I mean, there's the prologue, which is the Serpent Amphora, and then everything is 2 years prior to that. So the end of the prologue is actually almost the end of the book. There's literally 2 chapters that take place after the end of the prologue. And Eochaid ends up dying. He's dying at the, he drops him, here's the Amphora, take it, and run away, and he drops dead. He doesn't actually die, but he ends up almost dying, and he ends up in the hands of the bad guys, not the Amphora bad guys, but a different group of bad guys. And he ends up in the hands of he would consider his enemy, and certainly the enemy of the Vigilant, or an enemy of the Vigilance, and they have him in prison. And he doesn't stay in prison very long in book 2, but he has to make some really dark decisions as to how to survive and how to help his family and loved ones survive, and what he's going to do around that. So it's a really dark book, and it's just really hard to write a book that dark given what's going on in the world right now.
That's understandable. Yeah. I mean, you've got the time right now, but
yeah, I don't have the time right now is the other problem. And that's been another hit. But I do love his character, and I love his story. And then we're not supposed to be talking about that. We're supposed to be talking about the history of Scarn.
It's true. Well, I mean, introducing you and like your history and all that just helps bolster the fact that you know what you are about to talk about. So
I do know what to talk about. So as I was saying before, Scarlands, 35 plus books. I think it's like almost 40 if you count them all, if you count all the little things. A lot of information came from various sources, and one of the things I did early on, take all these various sources and try to pull it together into a centralized timeline. And originally I wrote something that was just a chronological, the order of events, and then more recently, and one of the things we did in lieu of working on book 2, as we knew it would be really helpful for Travis and Scarland's development, was creating a centralized timeline of everything that happened, everything mentioned in any of those books in order of how they occurred. So we've got these massive database spreadsheets of like every single flippin' event that's called out, and then this list of everything it's contradictory, which is a lot. I mean, and I'm not blaming them. So many books, such a short amount of time, things with disparate authors, things were going to contradict themselves. We look at And a lot of it can be explained simply as this is something like 50,000 years of history.
Yeah.
Of course, people are going to misremember things, or who could access that kind of information or misinterpret things that they got from archaeological evidence
Yeah.
or from history books. People lie in history books all the time. So of course, what's true out of this 50,000 years of history is not true, is to be interpreted. And what is true of the creation of the Titans and the creation of the gods is to be interpreted. I mean, you can ask a god, what was it like when you were born? And they might answer you.
Right.
But can you ask a Titan, what was it like when you were born? And do they even remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
you
no matter what
can.
they tell you, it might not be true. So
True. I mean, you can, in theory, if you're an epic level badass character, go have chatsies with Cadam at the bottom of the ocean. Vladuin did it in one of the books. But is he gonna tell you the truth? Because he's
right.
chained up, bleeding there, going, "I'm not going to tell you about the creation of the world." So
I just imagine he's like, "Are you kidding? Are you kidding me
yeah,
right now?"
yeah. So how true is this? That's a great excuse. Is we
Yeah.
can be like, well, side is true. But what we did discover is the Titans, each of them had an epoch, and this is actually described in a couple of the books, where throughout history, up until the war, each Titan sort of was overseeing events on Scarn and had an influence, and not just what happened, but also in terms of power and the environment. They talk about how spellcasters, presumably druids, their power and abilities come from the Titan who's in whose epoch it is, basically. So during the epoch of, say, Mormo, the big snaky Titan, the druids have a lot of power, serpents and poison and things relating to snakes. During the epoch of Thulkas, who's the Titan of fire, lots of fire magic. Sneeze and you cast fireball kind of stuff. So there's that interpretation as well, and there's a lot of lore consistent with that, of that there was these epochs in a certain order, and the Titans followed one after another throughout these. So that's kind of the basis, and there's 13 Titans.
Yeah.
Or are there 12? There's 12 or
Wait.
13 Titans.
So actually, I've got 12. Oh, I know who I don't have.
Don't have Titan of Winds, I bet.
What's that?
There's one Titan who is the secret Titan. Gulfane.
Oh, so I actually I don't have Denev because
you don't have Denev. Oh yeah.
So I got all of the pictures out of the Divine and Defeated.
Yeah.
And so Denev isn't in the defeated section, obviously. So
yeah.
But you'll get to that.
Yeah, I'll get to that. So we're looking at where do the Titans come from? For these, there's one reference in the Churn called Tale of the Ushada, and it said that before any of the Titans, before Scarn had anybody inhabiting it at the time. Although the Tale of the Ushada says when people were around, but then there's other as well, anybody around. There are two moons over Scarn, which are now called Belsmith's moon, and the orb is further out and creepy. And the story goes that the nameless orb got. Oh, sorry, might be because I turned to the left. Is that better? Okay. The nameless orb got all huffy and jealous of sister, the other, and decided to attack her in some way, and then did something to her, and then tried to do some kind of damage to the planet, and eventually damage to the spirits. So how he did this is mysterious. But Scarn at the time was not much life, maybe plant life, lots of oceans, a lot of, if any. But there were these spirits on Scarn that do shot. They were unformed. They weren't bound to any specific intent. They were just sort of spirits, and the most powerful of ones, or the most interested ones, like together once, decided we can't let the sun get destroyed. So somehow they left the planet and went up to this farm. And oh, I've been told my mic is dropping. Get a better mic. Guys. I'm gonna keep going. As if I try to hook this up. But they go to the far moon and they go up there and they try to stop him from destroying the sun. And they somehow ingest him, like eat him or something. It's not real clear what they do. But they prevent him from destroying the sun. And then they gain power from it. And when they come back to Scarn, after destroying him or somehow preventing him doing what he was going to do, come back to Scarn and they are way more. They gain some power. They did.
Your mic is dropping out again.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Also, Cassandra Miller.
I hope this.
Cassandra Miller says, "Hi, Sarah." Hooray, technology. It is the best. I haven't seen Sarah give out any spoilers yet, but we'll hope for it. There's so many mics going on, so many headsets.
Yeah, hot swap is. So, I am sorry. I don't know how to make the new mic. How bad is it?
Right now it's fine. It might be when you get quieter in your voices when it happens more often. So it might be that your mic is not picking it up quite as strongly.
Okay. Don't move. Talk loudly. I can't get all.
Just stare straight at the screen and talk very slowly and loudly.
Okay, I will do that. And next time I will have a less crappy mic. Anyway, I caught you saying something about. And then you went on, and I don't know what you said.
Cassandra Miller says hi, and she asked if you were giving out any spoilers for your campaign with her.
No spoilers. She already knows it all anyway. She's red vigilant, so she knows.
Tell Fran thanks for trying with the headset.
Yeah. My apologies. I will try to speak louder. So I don't know what we missed, but point was, bunch of spirits went up to the moon, stopped it from eating the sun, came back, Titans. Summed up. And there were 13 of them, and they got some kind of power from the moon that made them way more badass than any of these other spirits running around Scarn. And then the first one to kind of figure things out was Cadam, who's sort of the Godzilla of the Scarred lands. I always think
that's
of him
a really good way to put it.
Yeah, he doesn't have the nuclear breath, but he looks a lot like Godzilla. Big lizard thing, and he mucked around, except way bigger than. And he just pushed dirt around and made the continents. That's the description of what he did during his epoch. He's a titan of earthquakes and various things, and he's aquatic or I'm gonna say amphibious, so he can breathe underwater, like Godzilla. So he would create trenches under the ocean and push up land and create mountains and earthquakes and whatnot. That's kind of what he did during his epoch, and who knows how long it lasted, millions of years maybe, who knows. When he was at some point during that, the other Titans who were just sort of figuring their things out were like, "What's he doing?" And checked it out. What are these? Yeah. And so second Titan to really do anything was Gormoth. He's got a bit of a tragic story, although he's pretty horrible. He he that's myth goes that he created life, that he brought forth plants and animals, and eventually the first sentient races. And really, history of Scarn, in terms of anything that's quote written down for a fictional universe, that is, came during his epoch, because that's when the first people who could write came about, and he created some of those early races. They say that the other Titans were jealous of him and harmed him in some way by sticking these worms on him, which left him grievously wounded and basically tortured by this pestilence of worms, and that's kind of ended his epoch because it took away his power over Scarn. Where these worms came from, they say Mormo poisoned him, but did this happen then or later is a bit fuzzy. But either way, his epoch ended, and he became known as the Writhing Lord, because he's like always in pain and kind of messed up. And I gotta say, the word writhing, if you actually like do a search on that word in Scardland, these classic Scardlands book, it will be in nearly every book. They love writhing. I don't know why.
Like
We
every
made
other
sure
page.
we made sure to use it a couple times in Vigilant, because it feels like a Scardlands thing is to use that word. I don't know, but um, that was Gormoth, and I might be pronouncing these names differently. That's kind of where my brain pronounced them.
I haven't. Yeah, you're on par with what I think. So
Yeah, well, you said Denev, and I call her Denev. So
yeah,
I
that one.
I
It just kind of depends on how it ends up coming out of my mouth because there is like that like weird fluctuation you could go with
yeah
either way. So yeah, I got
yeah
you on that.
yeah. Then the next Titan to come into play was Gulfane, who, to my mind, other than Denev, is the nice Titan.
Yeah,
Because all the Titans are kind of dicks, pretty much.
it's so true.
They're supposed to be these like neutral create forces of creation, elemental. Others, a lot of the elements are covered. A lot of other basic forces are covered, but my theory is that that nameless moon that they nommed on was evil in some way, and may actually explain a lot of the origin of Scarn and why Scarn is so unique and weird. And that I think nomming on this moon and taking its power, that when their epoch comes into play, they get kind of evil. Because like a combination of that. So that's my theory. So we'll see if that becomes canon or not. But that's my theory. Is that planet, that planetoid, did that to them.
So
So
is sorry to interrupt. Is Vigilant considered
yeah.
canon?
Vigilant is canon, yes,
So
according to
technically, you
Rich
could
Thomas.
make that canon as long as they accept it.
Well, Vigilant's canon,
Hashtag things to do.
whether later books of Through Shadows and Dreams are also canon is debatable, but Vigilant's
That's fair.
well, it's all I know for sure, because Onyx Path published it.
And Cassandra asks about Mesos being. She says that he's kind of not horrible, but I'll let you explain that when you get to Mesos.
Mesos, well, a lot of them weren't horrible when they took over their epochs and became horrible later. It was
That's
actually
fair.
Mesos that gave me this theory. Because Mesos, initially, at the beginning of his epochs, which was quite a while out in my line here, is not a dick initially. He just sort of becomes a dick later. could almost blame Keeley for that though. So we'll get there. So the next one after was Gulfane, or Gulfane. I don't know how
So
to pronounce
Gulfane
that.
is what we're on,
So
and then
we're on. So third Titan, and he made spirits. We already had the spirits. We had the Ushada, but he gave creatures souls, and he may be responsible for races that actually become sentient races, or in some way get uplifted. And he really is responsible for souls being reincarnated. Theoretically, he made that there's this door of wood. That's the mythology goes that when someone dies, their spirit goes off to some plane, ethereal plane maybe, and they see this door of wood. They walk through the door and they are reborn as a new thing. And most of them don't have memories of what went on before, except for the incarnates. That's a whole nother thing. But they say the Gulfane made that possible, gave sentient beings or even non-sentient spirits that they could be reincarnated. And the other Titans got jealous, and after beating up Gormoth, they now beat up Gulfane, except they're even meaner to Gulfane. Instead of just Mormo sicking worms on, all of the Titans, or at least a bunch of the Titans, go and beat him up and basically deprive him of his senses. It's really horrible. I don't want to get into too many details, but he loses his face, and a lot of his senses are destroyed. But
And it
because he has
becomes
such
one of
this,
his names, right? The faceless one. Am I
yeah,
remembering that
well,
correct?
something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And but he has ability through like mental power to see through the eyes of his creatures and his creations. Um, but I consider him the really tragic Titan because he didn't really go evil
Yeah.
like everyone else did. I don't think he even had an opportunity to go evil. He's just kind of sad, and while he sides with the other Titans during the war, he kind of does it out of like patheticness and sort of like they made me,
Yeah.
more
Well,
so
because
than
he's the one
active.
who created the Dareth, which are
Yeah.
like the whole like there was a race of
Oh,
these
so
horn
tragic.
beasts or these horn creatures,
Yeah.
and they were created and they were like fairly good people and they were helpful in all
Yeah.
of this. And then was it um, Thulkas, I think, or somebody like was like, no, I hate these, and like went and ripped them all apart.
Yep.
And it's like scattered their little globby bits everywhere, but
Yep.
left them alive, which was even more horrid. So essentially, they just get to live in pain as little globby bits until they can find themselves again.
It's
And
horrible.
Gulfane gets to feel that. He gets to
Yeah.
experience that through his creations. So it's like,
Yeah.
wow, that sucks so bad for them.
Yeah. Another why I love Scarn so much. I mean, it's
Right?
horrible, but I love that the whole because the Dareth are supposed to be one of the very first, really the first sentient race, if not one of the very first sentient races in Scarn, was Gulfane's Dareth. Um, and they're really sad. And I'm not gonna go off on that tangent now, but I have tangents about the Dareth. The next one is the Epoch of Gulthaga. This is really the first epoch of civilization. And when it was mentioned that was Mesos that bad, I have the same argument about Gulthaga. Because he started off pretty good, because he was like, hey, you little people wandering around the planet, I'm gonna go play toys with you. And he basically showed them like, this is fire, and this is clothing, and this is a forge, and this is how you can do things, and set up civilization, really. And he just sort of made it possible for people to gather into towns and villages, and maybe even as far as cities, and create things. He taught metalworking, and those druids of that time could command the inert elements. They could do things with metal and wood that they couldn't do before, so their abilities were around that. And he may have created the dwarves as well, and they do all. But with civilization came cities. With cities, as we are experiencing right now, came plagues, and and get too many people together, they start spreading disease, and so social isolation people. So the plague started, and then the next Titan kind of came into play, and that's Churn. And of the Titans who I think are the worst, Churn gets top 2 rating of the worst of the Titans. He's a Titan of plagues and disease and pestilence and everything rotting and everything nasty. And while rotting things is good to turn over life, not so much when that's all that's happening, and that pretty much massacred all of these early civilizations on Scarn, or so the legends say. And Churn basically just created all of this illness and plagues and just awfulness, killing just thousands of people, because I guess he just didn't want Gulthaga to have his playthings. And then after that epoch pretty much wrecked everything, then Gorak, who's the other Titan who I consider the worst, came in, and he's like, I'm gonna eat everything. So Churn's a Titan of plagues. Gorak is the Titan of gluttony, of eating. And he's just this big walking blob with a mouth and teeth, and can be imagined these colossal shark teeth and these giant fangs, and he basically runs around and just starts eating everything. And what's interesting is I mentioned the moons earlier. The nameless orb, the far moon, is just this sort of rock in space. The other moon was actually had life on it, whether because Gormoth went up there and planted seeds, we don't know. But by this point, that other moon had life on it, and apparently Gorak had gone there because Titans can muck about throughout the at least the immediate solar system, and he went up there and ate all the life off of the moon, leaving it just a desolate wasteland, barren. And then came back to Scarn and started eating things on Scarn and creating, and that was much his epoch. So this kind of alerted the other Titans, in particular Mormo, Serpent Titan, got a little upset with Churn because he's eating everything, including she liked. So she poisoned all the plants and created basically this toxic environment, which made Gorak sick. So he was like, "I'm not eating those." She basically rescued civilization
by poisoning everything.
By poisoning everything. Well, yeah, because he was no longer eating everything. She created this stuff, and then her druids learned how to survive in.
Oh, sorry. Repeat that. Your mic dropped out.
Her druids learned to survive in the toxic environment that she created, so they could control poisons. They could control all the snakes that she had. Snakes became this life-giving. And during her, and this is about when one of the first civilization that's in quote historic record in Scarn, historic fictional world, but this is when the Asathi really first came in, and they had this massive empire on Gelspat.
And for those who haven't like played the game or read anything yet, the Asathi are essentially snake people, kind of like Yuan-Ti, but not in the. They don't have different forms. They don't have like the guy with those snake arms, all that. They are just snake-formed people, like a snake body with some arms and legs, which is a little weird. It's a little more humanoid shaped than just a snake would be.
Yeah.
But
they do have tails and they do have a kind of a snaky head.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've got 2 arms, 2 legs. And they do shed their skin, which is interesting.
I actually don't think I knew that. Good to know.
Yeah, there's this Asathi armor they make out of shed Asathi skin. It's a little creepy, but apparently it's like one of the best leather armor you can get. You know, add some studs and you've got some really cool armor. So yeah, it's buried in the lore if you look. So yeah, so Mormo's epoch took over.
Okay.
But then it kind of went south as things sort of cooled off. So, and an ice age crept in slowly towards the end of her epoch, and Lethene, the Titan of Wind, took over. And basically kicked off this really dark time where everything was windy and cloudy and stormy all over the planet, and started shifting that hot tropical time of Mormo into a much cool, wet time where this rains, floods, that really changed the landscape, and everything got cold. Eventually, it got so cold that an ice age really did set in. That became the Gulfane. Gulfane is super interesting because she's not just the Titan of Frost, but she's also the Titan of getting down.
Which I don't know if you're watching. I don't know if you're watching on Twitch with everyone, but like I'm sharing art and everything, and the only art for Gulfane from the Divine and Defeated is essentially. Pretty sure that's an orgy on the bottom half.
Yep. she is the Titan of sexy time during an ice age.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how they put those two together. I'm like really curious about that lore. Did that come from something? I don't know. But she's and her sexy times popular that way later after the Divine War, when she's finally defeated, the gods were so scared that they'd try to bring her back. That they erased all knowledge of her existence. They're like, nobody gets to know about Gulfane because they were convinced that her followers would try to bring her back because they're gonna want sexy times, and Idra can't quite cut this. So she's the goddess of sexy times. But so they actually erased all memory of Gullivan. So if you're looking through Scarred Lands lore, particularly the new player guide, you do not find any references to Gullivan. She's not listed. That's why players aren't actually supposed to know about her. So as she's in the old lore, but she's kind of vaguely mentioned. There's a few spells name on, and there's a few sects that know who she exists, but most of her information is like nope, nobody knows. So that was so basically she created this Ice Age, and apparently a lot of children, I don't know, sexy times as well. But it sent everybody
explosion.
Population exploded during an ice age, which doesn't make any
Right.
sense. So, but
Which is
apparently
what melted the ice.
Yeah, well, no. What melts the ice is actually
the
people
sex.
went subterranean, and they're like, it's too cold, so we all gotta go live in caves. Built like these underground shelters. I'm getting the dwarves were like, hey, we got some place. You want to crash here?
Right.
I don't know. History doesn't say. But races delve further into the rocks, and of course, as you know from Lord of the Rings lore, you delve too far into the rocks, you wake things up.
Right.
Well, they woke up two things, but in particular, they woke up Thulkas, the titan of volcanoes and lava and magma, and he got upset because apparently all this time he'd been spent underground sleeping, I guess. I don't know, but he got upset digging in, and he bursts out and basically stops the Ice Age by creating volcanoes, lava, and all of that, which really, to my mind, this is where civilization pretty much changes, and you're starting to see what is modern Scarn, so to speak. This is still several thousand, probably 5,000-6,000 years before call the Scarred Lands modern timeline. But out of Thulkas came the Empire of the Flame. Elthamian Empire. I'm literally reading that one because that's not one I can remember off the top of my head. So that came out of this as the druids suddenly tapped into fire magic, and that was a massive empire that surpassed all of Gelspad and various other places of Scarn. Toward the end of that empire, it got a little too big, as empires go, and there was these barbarians out in the Hilterland, and they started to get kind of badass Attila the Honey, and invaded the way barbarians tend to do, and the empire fell, and Gelspad, at least, if not all of it, fell in an age of savagery, and that led to the Prin.
Sorry, that broke out. Who's that?
Renrok. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh yeah.
H-I-N-R-U-K. I think it's Renrok. Maybe saying that wrong. He's, as Titans of dickness goes, certainly not as bad as Gorak or Churn, but he's kind of the ultimate, what I would call, self-centered, narcissistic bro, dude. He's in many ways the most human of all of the Titans. He looks like a human in terms of that, a colossal human, but he looks like a person in all the depictions of him. But he's also this just bloodlust driven hunter, and just really a dick overall. But it was also around this time, either during the probably based on my research and putting all this together, either during the epochs or during the epoch Renrok, that the gods were born. And basically there was the original, what I call the major gods, the victors, as well as a handful of what happened is two or more, usually two, Titans would get together who normally don't get along, but some for some whatever reason they do get along, and they go up to this huge massive mountain in the middle of this faraway continent, very far from Gelspad. Mountain that's impossibly tall, like makes magical mountain with a flat top Go figure. It's magic. And they create a god. Whether they do or they do something else, we don't know. Not clear, but they create a god. And the first was 3 titans got together, 3, and made Vangel, the god of destruction and beating things up, who's chaotic evil in the eventually.
And it is funny that he's the first god that was made during Renrok's time, because when I'm reading, I'm just like, wait, which one are they talking about? They're the same person.
And Renrok is not his father, is not his parent. He's actually the child of Leithine, Gulfane, and Class, I want to say. Don't quote me on that one. Who were Vangel's parents? I have to scroll down.
He was made during Renrok's epoch.
Oh,
right?
No, Churn. Leithine, Thulkas, and Churn. It may have been. It's not clear if it was Thulkas's reign or Renrok's.
Gotcha.
I think it was probably Thulkas's, but there's one book that annoys me that contradicts everything, which is the Forsworn and the Forsaken, which is like the book of the elf and the book of Termana history of the elves and the dwarves of Termana, and the dates in that book are a mess. They're just a total mess and contradict all the other books in terms of dates. And they claim that the gods showed up a lot earlier than that. So I don't know.
Yeah. They kind of have their own religion and their own view of things and everything. And that kind of makes sense. It's a completely different continent. So.
But.
Who's right? Who knows?
But the Titans and Gods are global.
Yeah.
So.
But their belief. So, like, the book being written that way made sense. So whoever was right, it doesn't really.
Yeah. But you can't. But my point is, the dates in that book you can't really factor in because they're so messy.
Yeah.
That, like I can't, because they just for recent stuff, and these are elves, they were alive. Just recent stuff, their dates for the Divine War are off by like 140 odd weird years.
Oh wow.
So I'm just like, I'm not trusting any dates from this. But so it's kind of fuzzy when the gods came in play with which epoch it was. There's not a lot of mention of the gods earlier than that, other than in that book. So the gods first start showing up around the epoch of Renrok. And then there's basically only. Let me make sure I get the order right. Only 2 more epochs after Renrok, which is Mesos and the modern day. Mesos, basically civilization kind of put back together again after the barbaric years under Renrok, and a new empire was formed in Gelspad called the Empire of Lead. And you hear a lot about the language Lydian, which is, I think of it as sort of Latin, because it's a root language that everybody can speak, but nobody uses as their first language because everybody's got a regional language. So Lydian's a trade language. And it's a base language of a lot of the languages you hear about, like Veshan and I think even Calastian. And then this empire of Lead gets formed in Gelspad, which covers pretty much the entire continent over its time. And that empire lasted about 5,000 years. And that's where the old calendar starts, is the founding of the Empire of Lead. And a lot of this is because of, it kind of founded as the epoch of Renrok waned and as the Mesos' epoch started, Empire of Lead is founded. Mesos is the Titan of magic. He's the 6-armed, freaky dude who, yes, was initially pretty good, nice guy. He really, as a result of him, sorcerers came into play and wizards came into play. And this is the other argument as to what, not when the gods were born, but when the gods were discovered. When clerics came to be was during the epoch of Mesos, and this is pretty clear. Wizards, it started with wizards. Wizards started dabbling into other planar concepts, and through researching this, they discovered the divine planes where the gods live, and tapped into that and found the gods. Why are the gods in divine planes and not Scarn, you ask? Well, when the gods were born, or shortly after they were, Titans kind of dicks to them for the most part. Not to all the gods, but to the majority of the gods. They were pretty awful. And I don't remember if it was. I want to say it was. Maybe my memory is not that. Hadrada discovered an out. He found out that they could go extraplanar spaces, and through them basically escape the brutality of their parents, and live there instead. And so all of the major gods, the king, there was originally the 8 victor gods: Corian, Madriel, Tanel, Hadrada, Enkili, Bangal, Belzameth, and Chardun. But also a couple of the other there were 3 or 4 other gods that are on that level, but they don't come into play later, and they end up getting the status of demigods, although they were also Titan, by 2 or more Titans. But all of them basically went off these extra planar spaces and discovered whether they made the divine plane, discovered them, is not clear, but they're basically their respective heavens and hells associated around their own aspect, i.e. alignment. I can't hear you anymore, so
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm just listening.
Okay, yeah. So they went off and lived there, and then they got stuck, and they couldn't leave those planes. And these wizards during the Epoch of Mesos kind of discovered these planes and connected with them and started to be able to speak to the gods, their own magic, and enabling the gods to come back, and basically created the concept of cleric. And what the gods discovered is when mortals pray, or demi-mortal, these people pray to them instead of to the Titans, and the Titans don't give a crap if you pray to them. They don't care. They don't listen. I mean, they might listen. They're in the mood, but that's not their thing. But when pray to a god, the god gets power. And suddenly the gods are like, yes, please keep doing that. and suddenly the gods are able to come back, and they're able to break out of these extra dimensional planes that they've been stuck in all this time, and for who knows how long, an epoch or 2. And during the Epoch of Mesos, come back, and thus people started worshiping gods, and clerics started getting these new powers that only the really high level druids could do, and suddenly things that could never been seen before, particularly healing magic, raising the dead, and things like that had never been. And they were like, whoa, who are these guys? And those clerics made it possible to like build civilization and survive, because with their powers they could suddenly do things that you'd never seen, that wasn't over in the hands of just. So between the wizards and the clerics and the sorcerers, you suddenly have up, and civilization changes pretty dramatically. Mesos also got really friendly with the elves, Mana, and gave them power. And there's some other stuff that I could go into, but I don't want to spend too much more time on this. Where there's some other races. There's the dragons and how they're involved in all this, and then there's another race, and they're complicated, and they're both the dragons, the Thracian. Dig into this story really early in the beginning.
Yeah.
I haven't mentioned yet, but they're really a deep part of this lore as well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because here's a pronunciation difference. So I say Slaricians.
Yeah. I can't say it that way because it's still too B for me. So actually, I said.
It took me the longest time to be able to say it, and when the Slarician Vault opened and I was on Travis's podcast, I would try and say I'm publishing on there, and I'm just like, I'm publishing on Travis, say that word, say that. But it's funny that you mentioned like the discrepancies in the publications, because some of it is obviously on purpose, because they talk about the Slaricians in their own book, and they're like, here's the true history of them and how it contradicts all of this stuff we've already said because of these reasons. And I thought that was just like such a cool thing to do. I'm a big fan.
So that goes back to my theory about this would be a whole other podcast of Slaricians and their
Yeah.
origin, because they've been around since the beginning. You know, they've been around since those Titan nommed on the moon.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they're there. I think they saw that happening and like, what is this? And they got trapped.
Yeah.
Scarn, and they can't leave. And they don't like it because they're not from Scarn. Everything else is theoretically either from Scarn or plane. And the exceptions are the possibly. Although the dragons don't mind being on Scarn, apparently. Clear. The dragons are a whole nother mystery.
Yeah. They're fun.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting because, like, on Gelspad, there aren't true dragons. There's like an array every so often there you might find one that was like hiding out, but for the most part they were like, I'm out, and they left.
There's like 2 or 3 true dragons on all of Gelspad.
Yeah.
They're not a thing in Gelspad. Yeah.
And I feel like dragons and Slaricians can both be their own episode coming up because there's so much information about both of them.
Oh yeah, and I have a lot to say about Slaricians. And that's how I say I think it's easier for me to, I don't know if that's pronouncing it right, but I can say it.
As long as we both know what we're talking about, that's fine.
I don't even know if I can say it the way I've been saying it so many years. Probably I only found recently that I've been saying it's Belzameth, not Belsameth.
It's supposed to be Z, like
Belzameth. Yeah, it's supposed to be a hard Z.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and it's Chardoon. And I pronounced it Chardon for the longest time. So, no, it's Chardoon. Like I pronounced someone else's. I can't remember. Anyway, there's a bunch that I just get wrong, and I know I get them wrong.
That's fine. And that's the thing is, it's your game, so make it what you want.
Yeah. Except when my players are like, "Who are they talking about?" And I'm like,
"You should learn who I'm talking about. Pronounce it my way." So
I get
let's cover the just the concept of the Divine War, and then we'll call that good for the first brief history of Scarn episode.
Yeah. So towards the end of the epoch of Mesos, what caused the Divine War? More theories on that. A bunch of things happened. Bad things happened. But either way, the gods pissed off the Titans and the gods gathered up and said, we're back. Our parents are still dicks. We don't want to do this anymore. We need to put them down. They convinced Denev to side with them because she saw what the Titans were doing to her planet, because she's the Titan of Earth, of the Earth itself, and of Scarn as the thing. And she was like, yeah, I don't like the fact that Cadam keeps tromping around and creating quakes, and this guy's making volcanoes, and they really need to stop them. So she sided with the god, because she actually cared about people. I also goes back to my theory that their epochs make them evil, because she hadn't had an epoch yet.
Yeah.
She was the only Titan left that wasn't evil. Theory. So the gods and her gather together. They start this war. Later podcasts, I can describe how the war started. A lot of theories around. And there's this war lasts about 80-something years. Vague in terms of how many years, because time gets all wibbly wobbly during that bit.
I was actually going to ask how you came up with 80 years, because I've never found anything that like definitively says how long it was, and so it's really hard to. Nice.
I have found definitively say what. And I do have dates, the actual length of the war. Old calendar. 1456 to 1529.
Gotcha. So essentially the beginning of the war was about 230 years before modern days.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very possible that there are people kicking around that were there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously the Titans are around, or the gods are, but elves. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So I think that's where the dates came from. So it was actually the Gelspad campaign. the dates for the start
Gotcha.
and the end of them. But yeah, length to those years pretty fuzzy.
Yeah.
Because some years lasted like 4 months, you know. So
Time is
was
a
that a
fluid
year?
concept.
Yeah, it got really messy during that. So yeah, how do you find a year when time is being mucked with because of
Right.
giant magic? But yeah, that happened, and at the start of the year, they started it by just the first Titan they stopped with Mesos, and basically you can't kill a Titan, you can basically disrupt them or sunder them,
Mm-hmm.
and the first Titan they sundered was Mesos epoch, so that ended his epoch right there, and Denev's epoch began at day one of and then the war happened, they said, and lots of things happened throughout the war. They defeated each Titan one by one, and I also have the story on that, which is a whole nother thing. And eventually, at the end of that period, Denev was like, "I need to rest," and she goes back into the earth, sleeps, and tries to heal all the destruction they did during 80 odd years. And the gods are trying to kind of undo all the destruction they did. At least the gods who care.
Yeah.
Um, some of them were like, "Oh, now I conquer see Chardoon," so we're like, "Now everything is despaired. We will create a new empire." Um, and that happens. So there's a lot that happened in there as well. Um, but it's pretty amazing stuff. And then the modern timeline got everything that happened 150 years, the end of the war, to quote the modern day AV 150. And a lot of people's campaigns obviously, are bloody around that. Because then you project what's beyond AV 150.
Yeah.
Original canon goes to tail end of AV 151
Gotcha.
into 152, which is the return of elf god who died during the war and is resurrected in the canon. New canon, we'll see where that goes. Where new canon is back to AV 150. The elf god isn't back yet. How that's gonna work out is the same or not. Right now we're really focusing just on Gelspad. Epic level in 5e isn't really, there isn't a popular push to that, and a lot of this stuff really is supported around the epic level.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how well that's going to happen with 5e is still street. But there's so much lore we have to play with just for Gelspad that we don't have to look at the other continents yet,
Yeah.
because we're still digging at that. And Gelspad is about the size of North America, just to give you a sense of scale. Termana is 4 times the size of Gelspad.
Right.
More than 4. I think it's more than 4 times the size. It's massive. But there's not as much lore. The most lore that's out there is Gelspad. And there's just so it's going to take us a few years just to dig through that and expand on that and revise that 5e. Which, Jugman's Guide, Vigil Watch,
Yay!
The dozens and dozens of publications coming out on the story scene.
Right.
We've got one coming out soon. It's going to be coming out on the Tales of Jugman's Guide Part 2. We can't put it out until that's out because we've got stuff from it. But we're going to be putting out a little module. Vigil missions. We've been doing vigilant missions to tie in with, or not vigilant. So we're going to be doing vigil, maritime mission for vigilant, or vigil mission.
Nice.
People play vigilance, and they go on these little training missions. First one, training time. A lot of stuff is the Blood Sea, so we're tying into that, and we're tying Jugman's Guide content from the playtest. So
nice.
That, and we're hoping to get that out. Well, hopefully the day after Jugman's Guide Part 2 comes out, whenever that is.
Which is, I think, at the end of this month, so just a few days.
Yeah, it should
I
be.
feel
Should
like
be
Travis
out.
said something like the 27th or something like that.
Yeah. So we're on target. We just have to finish up. We got like 2 more pages to write, and we'll be done. So
nice.
So that'll be coming out on the Vault, and there's just so much stuff.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So I recommend everybody check out the Story Scene Drive-Through RPG.
Yeah. I'm actually posting the links in chat, but I will also put them in the show notes for when this goes on YouTube and podcast for people who didn't get to watch live.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of, I don't want to say important to say, but it's one of my favorite things about the classes, and even the races. So there's a couple things about Scarlands rules wise and flavor wise that I've always liked, and you mentioned it several times, but I want to clarify. So druids aren't like, I go hug trees and cast magic. It's like every Titan had druids, so they were almost like the clerics of that Titan, and therefore there was like this huge separation in their powers. And so rules wise for players options, druids get a bunch of new options, which is cool because like they're flavored differently. They should have different options. Yeah. So seeing that stuff coming out is, I mean, there's some stuff in the Scarlands Player's Guide, and there's new stuff coming out in Yugman's, and it's fun.
Yeah. Druids, according to the lore, get their power from Titan, who's epoch. So imagine like you were a druid of Meso,
right?
Or you were getting your power from Meso. Not sorry, a follower of Meso. You're getting power from Meso. So you were like basically a sorcerer druid.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, boom, Mesos is shattered. And suddenly you're like, and now I can turn into a wolf?
True.
You're suddenly,
True.
It's Denev. Denev just takes out, and every other one, it was sort of gradual. Denev, it was an instant, because it was like Mesos shattered, boom,
right.
And within 24 hours, it's suddenly this nature thing. And you're dealing with earth and plants and trees and animals. And your concept of druid gets turned on its head in a way that druids haven't been for epochs.
Yeah.
So what is this? Why am I, so for hundreds of, if not thousands of years, it'd been magic based, or before that it was like, I guess Epoch of Renrok was kind of similar powers as Denev, so there's that. But certainly not a lot of people were alive that long, because Epoch of Mesos was probably several thousand years.
I think his was the longest, right? Except for maybe
Cadam.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And that one, I mean, how long did he push dirt around? So
yeah, exactly. We don't know. But Mesos was really long, and so suddenly you're like, I make magic missile. What is this? I have a stick in my hand. What?
What do you mean thorn whip? What is this thorn whip? I don't understand. What am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, so suddenly these druids are like completely topsy-turvy and having to deal with like nature magic and animal changing. So it's really, it is put on your head. And thankfully they've had 150 years to figure that out. But any of those old elves were like, yeah, we're into nature now.
And then the other side of things I was going to talk as far as like Scarlands and the rules side of things, races are hardier, and there's a reason for it, because everything kills you. It's like if Australia was a planet, everything kills you, and so the people have to be hardier. And so even like your commoners could like go over and kick like Forgotten Realms first level characters' butts.
Oh yeah. You have to be. To be, and that's one of the challenges. It's one of the challenges of 5e is how to. But yeah, I mean, you look at. I run a game on the Sword Coast, right? And everybody's like, I'm just gonna be human, And there's like, I guess I'll be an elf. Oh, they're not nearly as cool unless I go with this very specific class that's blind to elves. But most people, unless they're going for a specific, like, I'm going to be a barbarian, therefore I'm a half. Is you mostly play humans, and Scarlands, nobody wants to play human. It's like, no, I'm gonna be. I mean, part of it is because Scarlands are all these really furry races.
Yeah.
Cat folk or rat folk or snake folk or horse folk or a bad folk or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it also is, honestly, the races are just more badass, and even the halfling elves are badass than, yeah. And if you actually dug into the Pathfinder stuff, if you looked at the Pathfinder player guide, it's even scarier what you can do. Like a Pathfinder Scarlands, Pathfinder First Edition, but Pathfinder Scarlands character is terrifyingly more badass than a straight Pathfinder character. Wow. As I rolled Pathfinder game, and I was like, these are level 2, and they're just terrifying. The number of things you can level 2 character. So yeah, there's definitely a step up in terms of what you need just to survive
Yeah.
and handle it. And it's not that the CR are off. It's just that just like this overwhelming need to, it's just, it makes sense of the state of the world.
Yeah. So we'll probably wrap this episode up with that. I think that's a good. I mean, there's a lot in that time period that we haven't talked about, but
Yeah.
I mean that's a future episode. So
Yeah.
I think maybe next time we will talk about dragons because everyone likes dragons, and I feel like when you have a setting that has dragons and people are just like, okay, you run into the dragon, but you don't do that in Gelsbad. So we need to talk about why you don't do that and what you do run into instead, because there are things out there that people may think are dragons.
They are technically draconic in
They
nature.
They
But,
are.
yeah.
But then we'll talk about what the the nature of actual dragons is and how kind of awesome that was, because no spoilers.
No spoilers.
So
yeah, I've got all that lord.
Thanks everybody for watching, coming to chat, and we will be here next Friday as long as everything works out time wise. Cool.
Yeah, so far so good. And
awesome.
at least as long as I'm in social distancing isolation, I will be working from
right.
Easy to do.
And who knows how long that'll be? We might be here in 6 months. Who knows?
I don't want to think about it.
But everyone, be safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And you're always free to message me on Twitter at WHPubs, or come find me on Facebook. Also, WHPubs is the address. My website is WH Publications, which, by the way, is short for Wanderer's Haven. It was just too much to put on there. Sarah, tell us where to find you on the internet.
Fine. Our website is likethisindustries.com. And you can find, I'm on Twitter as like this too, but I don't really do the Twitter very much. The best one to actually contact with my wife. She's on Twitter at Lynn Valor. ONLINBALR, I think. And she's also she's in Travis League's Monday afternoon Twitch game.
Yeah.
That you're in.
I am.
And you can find her, and I'm also as Ketina, Ketina, on various places on Tumblr and wherever. And I'm on Facebook if anyone.
Awesome. I'll share all of your links in the post notes, just so if people want to come chat with you, they can.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will
On
see
Discord.
everyone in a week, and take care. Bye.
Bye.